Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the CEO of the NITI Aayog, Mr. BVR Subrahmanyam, who's had quite a harrowing morning trying to get from Delhi to Mumbai today because we've had technical glitches at the Delhi airport, which has led to significant delays. So thank you for braving all of that, Mr. Subrahmanyam, and still being here with us at the Global Leadership Summit. You know, I want to pick up where Niall Ferguson left off, and he said that we're living in a world where India, in his words, quote unquote, cannot be polyamorous anymore. You will have to pick a side. You will have to make a choice. Is it the US or is it the BRICS? I want to understand from you, do you see this as a choice that India will be forced to make as well, given what President Trump and the Trump administration has decided to do?
So I think that's a very, a very one-sided view, which I heard just now. I think the situation is a bit more complex. Let me take a minute or two just to explain. Just look, there were a lot of certainties since the Second World War. You had a Washington consensus, you had a consensus on free trade, you had the WTO, you had a general belief in multilateralism. All the certainties seem to be going. So the world is in flux. What does that mean? It means you just look at it economically. You see a world where trade is flat, FDI is flat or declining. The world doesn't know how to handle this. And what we are actually heading for is a world where low growth is a norm. We were growing at about 3.5%, 3.7% trend globally before COVID. But in the last few years, the trend seems to be sub 3%, and that's what it's going to be. And in all this, India is a standout case. I mean, it's the brightest spot in the global economy, and that's what makes it important in the context of what you asked. It's bright because it's got size, it's got a market, and it's got innovation talent. Given that, I think India will be a pole which will attract everybody else. So rather than us being forced to make choices, others will be compelled to actually reach out to India. And I think that's the sweet spot India is in. So it's not necessary for India to take sides. People will cut their own cloth to adjust to India. I think that is what it is. I think, and I think that's the way the government is actually moving. That we have, and there's another thing. We are doing good. And we are doing very good because there are strong inherent strengths. And I think if you have to live in the slightly more turbulent times, be it war, be it economy, be it tariffs, build up your internal strengths. The more you build up your internal strengths, the more the world will actually look at you far more favorably. You will be compelled to make far fewer tough choices.
Well, one tough choice, of course, at this point in time that we know that we're grappling with is, of course, how do you engage and how do you deal with the US? The US has put forward what it wants India to do, especially as far as Russian crude, etc. is concerned, and we've made our position known, and we've hopefully made our position understood as well. But given the almost sort of, it's an unyielding piece at this point in time, how do you see this playing itself out in the long term?
So I think things have been a bit difficult with the United States. And I think a reset is being tried. The trade negotiations are on. I wouldn't like to preempt anybody. Hopefully, end of the month, we may hear some news on that front. Having said that, what the US government is saying and what the US corporates are saying are totally different. You are still continuing to have the steady stream of foreign investors coming to India. You've got American companies opening global capability centers in India. You don't see anybody lessening their importance being given to India. So that basically means the fundamental attraction of India will trump everything else.
Will trump everything else. That certainly is the hope, and that does deserve a round of applause as well here for Mr. Subrahmanyam. But, Mr. Subrahmanyam, irrespective of what finally happens as far as the India-US bilateral trade agreement is concerned, you've always been a very firm believer in the fact that India must actually cut its tariffs, that it's in India's interest to bring down its tariffs.
So there are a couple of things. Let me elaborate a bit. We want to be a Vikasit Bharat, which means we want to be a developed nation. If we want to be a developed nation, we must have a long-term goal, which has been set. The Honorable Prime Minister had made it very clear. We should be a $30 trillion economy, $18,000 by 47. There are some principles which we should not forego, irrespective of what happens. Number one, don't forego openness. You need to be a world-class country irrespective of how anybody else behaves. I mean, just because there are tariffs in one part of the world, the rest of the world hasn't changed its behavior. I mean, you still have a COP going on next week, irrespective of somebody not joining it. So I think the importance of that is something we need to realize, openness. Second, we need to be a leader in green transition and addressing, the clean energy transition. Extremely important. They're a core principle. And the third one, focus on our people, focus on our strengths. That means invest in people. As long as you invest in people, I think you're pretty good.
And to the point that you made that India must remain open for the benefit of the people who are watching, last night the finance minister in a conversation also mentioned that India's Atmanirbharta policy should not be seen as an isolationist policy, and that's the point that's being made here by you as well, Mr. Subrahmanyam. But Niall Ferguson was also talking about the low-hanging fruits that India must address in order for us to be able to do the 8 to 10% growth ambition aspiration that we have to fulfill. Now, from NITI Aayog's perspective, given where we find ourselves today, domestically as well as globally, what would you prioritize?
Okay, so look, this is a country whose fundamentals are very good. Fiscal prudence is there, inflation is under control, demography is in our favor, and I think that's okay. So what do we need to do? We need to do a couple of important transitions, and I think that's priority. First, we need to make a transition from agriculture to industry. I think that's long pending. A lot of emphasis has been given in the recent past, PLIs, this, that. But I think the transition to manufacturing of two types, high-tech advanced manufacturing on one end and labor-intensive manufacturing. One takes you to the cutting edge of the world economy, the other creates jobs. That's absolutely important. And I think that was the biggest announcement in the last budget, which is the National Manufacturing Mission. And I'm hopeful that by the end of November, the mission will be up and running. The NMM is going to transform India's manufacturing landscape. It's going to be a very different approach, quite different, not throwing money alone, but actually focusing on building capabilities.
I want to go back to the first point that you made, that we're living in a world where trade is flat, where FDI is flat. Now, India has been trying to draw in foreign direct investment across different sectors, from semiconductors to AI and so on and so forth. Given the fact that there is this global uncertainty and nervousness which seems to be impacting FDI, what worries you about our potential to grow at the rates at which we aspire without the requisite amount of FDI?
So I think this is going to be a topmost priority. Firstly, we need sustained growth of 8 to 9% for about 25 years. That itself is a big challenge.
Are we on the cusp of that?
We are on the verge. We're doing the right things. I think from next year onwards, we should be touching those kind of numbers. I mean, that's the goal. And I think the policy levers are being tweaked, number one. If you're going to have 8 to 9% growth, I mean, even if you have a capital output ratio of 4, you need 35, 36% of investment every year. We are not yet there. We're around 30, 31%, and it's been a bit flat at that. That additional 4 to 5% investment has two parts to the problem. One is, I think the government has been doing a lot. A lot of capex has been going. Households have been doing a lot. People have been buying houses, building stuff, etc. I think the private sector capex cycle needs to kick off. And one good thing is, thanks to the cut in GST, the GST festival that has happened, the reduction in income tax rates, the exemption limits being raised, I think more money is being put in pockets. You're going to see a boost in that. So that's the second. So the investment cycle needs to kick off. But on the other side, domestic capital is not going to be enough. So out of that 35, 36% that we need, 3 to 4% has to come from outside. We have touched 3 to 4% long ago, but that was a much smaller economy. Yeah. So 3% of a $4 trillion economy is quite different from 3% of a $300 billion.
So would you consider this one of your biggest worries today?
This is one of the biggest areas of focus, where we need to be actually kicking up our FDI dramatically, and that's it. And the good thing is, you got all the major multinationals in the world looking at India, thanks to the uncertainties. There are companies which are just wanting to shift operations from one country to the other. What does this mean from us? They're interested in India for two reasons: domestic market, and we are one of the best low-cost destinations for manufacture. Having said that, we need to cut our paperwork. We need to cut our bureaucracy. The Prime Minister keeps talking about, minimum government, maximum governance, ease of doing business. Get out of the way of business. make life easy. We don't want people to fly in with interest and fly back disappointed.
How much are we still in the way, though?
So this is the other area on which a lot of work is happening. If you actually tick the boxes on reforms, Government of India has probably done 90-95% of it. Take the Income Tax Act. It's about two-thirds the size of what it was earlier. 90% of the work now is left in the states. So we have a task force under the Cabinet Secretary. He is pushing day to day, without publicity, reforms at the state level. Every day I'm seeing some news item. For example, you want to convert agricultural land to industrial land, you need 1,000 permission. Andhra has just gone ahead and removed that permission. So it's a major transformation. I mean, why can't I be allowed to use the land the way I want it to be used? So a lot is happening on that. So I think the PM has been very clear, reforms, reforms. Cabinet Secretary working with states. We have two committees in NITI Aayog. One of them, by the former Cabinet Secretary, is called the High-Level Committee on Non-Financial Sector Reforms. They're focusing only on cutting down paperwork and waste. The first report covered three areas: environment, MSMEs, and the whole area about restrictions in manufacturing, etc. They're not public documents, but I'm seeing coverage in some papers. But even if half of them get done, that's going to be transformative. They're going to add 1% or 2% to India's growth.
But why haven't we seen them being done, and when do you hope that they will be done?
No, I think we shouldn't, I don't think there's any need to be sorry, because the reports have just gone out in October. So we're just about 4 weeks away from it. I think there's very high level attention. The highest level attention is being paid to that. So I foresee in a month or two, much before the budget, some of these things happening. I think the systems are working full time. You go to Delhi, nobody is asleep. They're working 24/7.
We couldn't have asked for a better start than to start with Mr. KV Kamath, somebody who knows India, somebody who's been deeply associated with India's financial services sector, and somebody who is and always will be a perma bull on India. Mr. Kamath, thank you very, very much for joining us here at the Global Leadership Summit, sir.
Thank you, Shireen.
Well, let me get started, sir, with the sector that you've, of course, been most involved with India's banking sector. And today, as is very, very evident and very clear, over the last few years, we've seen India's banking sector revive, clean up its balance sheet, emerge much stronger. In fact, State Bank of India crossed 2 milestones yesterday, crossed the $100 billion mark in market capitalization, but also crossed the 100 trillion rupee mark in business. And I was asking C.S. Sethi, the chairman of State Bank of India, what's the aspiration from here? And he said to be amongst the top 10 banks globally in the next 5 years. Mr. Kamath, that is an audacious aspiration and an audacious ambition. Do you think that India's banking sector is poised to break into the top 10?
Yeah. Firstly, my compliments to State Bank in achieving these 2 milestones. My answer is certainly yes, for a simple reason. This would not have been possible if we are not growing at the pace we are growing. And it would not have been possible if the banking sector was systemically not as strong as it is today. So given these two things, we will reach the aspirations set by State Bank of India and indeed other bankers. Again, sometimes I look back to see what I can see ahead. And when I look back at, say, China, circa 2000, 2005, that period, is when the bank started bulking up. And that's where you could see the pace of, I would say, growth go into double digits. So I think our steady growth of 7% or that range should take us to that sort of bulking in the next few years.
And yes, SBI has also upped its credit growth guidance to between 12 and 14% for the year. But, in terms of the next stage of reforms for the banking sector, and to talk specifically about public sector banks, Mr. Kamath, the expectation is that we're now going to see the next wave of consolidation as far as public sector banks is concerned, because the government wants not just world-class banks, but also world-sized banks, so bigger banks. Do you believe that consolidation is the answer?
I entirely agree with the government's path for a very simple reason. Historically, consolidations have happened, at least in the Indian context, when things were not good. I think this is the first time when things are good and you're consolidating. And what does consolidation get you? It gets you scale and gets you bulk and gets you, I would say, efficiency of operation. And all these are critically important today, and even more so when you're talking of, I would say, a technological revolution that you're all going through. So this is absolutely the correct move at this point in time.
Correct move at this point in time. Another possible move is the consideration to enhance the FII limit for public sector banks, which is capped at 20% currently, to 49%. The PSB view is that this gives private sector banks an unfair advantage when we talk about FII participation. It doesn't actually dilute equity at all. Why not do it?
I entirely agree. The playing field has to be level. Why should there be a playing field which is different for private banks and different from public sector banks? Over the last whatever number of years you want to count, the public sector banks have played a major role in the banking system, and I don't see that changing. So you need to have a level playing field going forward.
You know, while we level this playing field, so to speak, Mr. Kamath, what gives you the most confidence about what we're seeing in the banking sector and in the larger financial services sector? When we last spoke, you said banks don't need to worry about other banks. They need to be worried about what's happening on the fintech side. They need to be worried about tech companies who are also doing banking. As you look at the landscape and how much it's changed today, where do you find confidence and where are your concerns?
Yeah, my biggest confidence is the fact that what gives me the biggest confidence is the fact that the bank balance sheet is clean. If we were having this conversation in a situation where bank balance sheets are not clean, profitability is not at healthy levels, then we would have probably gone in a different direction. So banks are strong, and banks can today compete. So they have capital, they have people, they have understood how to use technology. So they have all the elements. What is required is to understand how the new player, what I call the new co, any fintech or any player which is not a bank but is agile in using technology, how are they acting, and make sure that you keep pace with them. That is a challenge. So that challenge exists, but I think it's a challenge you can overcome. And that's where I think in another session that I was having with one of your colleagues, I said that banks are spending money, but they need to spend it where, in a competitive sense, it is most productive.
Which means to actually acquire capabilities, to acquire some of these new cores that you spoke of?
No, not necessarily. What I mean is to put in the right technology that is appropriate for today, rather than do more of the same thing that we were all doing over the last few years.
Yes, so to disrupt yourselves using technology. Yeah. But, what we've also seen happen over the last few years is the retail participation in the India equity story has picked up very significantly post-COVID, and it's been a very secular rise across the nation, fueled by domestic participation and domestic capital. Has that surprised you? And given the unlock that we've now seen happen, what is the kind of headroom for growth that you foresee?
No, I think the India story is driven by 2 or 3 things. I think, firstly, it is the long runway that we have. So that gives you headroom. If you did not have a 25-year growth runway, and why do we have that? Because I would think most of India is still to be built. That act of building itself provides the momentum. Again, you look at how growth has happened in other domains in the last 30, 40 years or 50 years. Japan first, Southeast Asia, tiger economy, Southeast Asia, China. You see the transformation journey starts with building what you don't have. And that itself propels you to a status where the next leap becomes easier. I think we are well on that journey. So that headroom we have. Then comes the question that is often asked, where's the capital?
Yes.
I think now we have clearly shown that question has been asked for now at least 30 years that I have been in banking. Not the 50 years I was in development banking, but the 30 years that I have been in banking, that question has been asked, but where is the capital? I think the India story is what I would call a very measured growth. The government has always been careful to make sure that we grow at a pace which we have the ability to support. But today, I think we can grow at a faster pace because the access
What
to...
is a faster pace, sir?
I would say that we should actually aspire for a 10% growth rate. And then we will achieve 8%. So that's what we need to do. And also, and I'm very happy that the index is being reset of, say, industrial production or various indices, because we will then have a better picture of at what pace are we really growing. I would think that we're probably growing a little faster than what we all assume.
Than what the numbers reflect at this point in time.
Reflect.
Yes, and that review is, of course, underway at this point in time for metrics that measure inflation as well as growth. But, Mr. Kamath, you talked about this aspiration of getting to 10%, and you said if we aspire for 10, we'll probably get 8. If you were to look at the landscape today and the measures that have already been taken, this year, the effort seems to be to boost consumption. We saw the income tax cuts, and we've just seen the indirect tax cuts by way of the GST. What next would you prioritize to really get to that 8 to 10% number?
See, I think we have to get on to what I call a virtuous cycle. Consumption is one part of that virtuous cycle. Investment is the other side. And the question could be, where do you invest? As I said, that's where the long horizon comes in. So you've got enough to invest. And as GDP goes in, aspirations change. That's the third part of it. So this keeps the momentum going. Now, again, historically, we would, that rhetorical question that I said, but where is the money to fund this? And that question has now been answered. Now, a classic case that I would is to say how this got addressed is NHAI. NHAI, we used to always, I'm talking of NHAI, say 10 years back or so. How will NHAI fund all the highway needs of this country? Just didn't seem possible because it would otherwise take a larger and larger portion of the budget. But today, that issue is a non-issue, because what they have already put in place is now getting tolled properly. And that tolled road is now you create an INVIT out of it, and you have a funding which was not thought of or could not even have been conceived of 5-10 years back. So basically, we are creating new avenues to fund ourselves, and all this without necessarily looking at foreign capital. If I look at last 5 years, most of our growth has come through domestic capital, unlike most other domains. So we have got a lot of levers to push. We are on that virtuous cycle, and I think we will keep pumping at a good pace.